Welcome. Today we are going to be talking about 4 main categories of migraine triggers. My name is Casey. I'm the Migraine Nutritionist. I help people like you discover more pain-free days through finding lifestyle and diet changes that you can make that will effectively help prevent and manage your migraine. So today's video we are talking about triggers, and this is one of the things that I really like to focus on in helping people manage their migraine. We all do have our own unique set of triggers, so what triggers me particularly may not trigger you. There is also another complicating factor of something called the threshold theory, which essentially means that triggers may impact you differently every time you're exposed to them. Something that a doctor once told me is that triggers stack, so that might be a good way for you to think about it. I'll get more into that in another video, so that's just kind of a preview. So let's just jump into it. I have to actually go to work in just a few minutes, so we need to get going. So first things first, what is a trigger? A trigger is not the reason that you have migraine disease. It's simply the initiating factor to each attack, which is a flare-up of our symptoms. The reason you have migraine is likely because you're genetically predisposed to developing it, so it probably runs in your family. So category number 1 is environmental triggers. The first thing I think about when I think about environmental triggers is weather. You may notice things that are tied to your migraine attacks like storms, barometric pressure shifts, cold fronts, hot fronts, humidity, etc. There are also some sensory things that are considered environmental triggers, so things like loud sounds, strong smells, which can be like chemicals, odors, perfumes, smoke, and then lights. It can be bright lights, flashing lights, LED lights. One thing to note about those sensory environmental triggers is that some people believe that if you're noticing those as potential triggers frequently, that might actually be a sign that you are already developing a migraine attack rather than it actually being a trigger, because sensitivity to light, sound, and smell are common migraine triggers and common early warning signs or prodrome migraine symptoms. I have a previous video all about migraine attack phases, so check that out if prodrome is a new word for you. Category number 2 is lifestyle. So the first thing that I always think about is stress, because stress seems to impact a lot of us. There are 2 ways that stress may be correlated to your migraine attacks. One way is the increase of stress, and the second way is the decrease of stress. So you may notice that you're consistently getting migraine attacks on really big days that you might have something significant going on, like an exam or presentation. But on the other hand, you may be noticing you're consistently getting migraine attacks on days that you're supposed to be relaxing. So like the first couple of days of a vacation or consistently every weekend. Another lifestyle trigger is exercise. Exercise is actually super important to helping manage migraine because it can be such a great prevention tool. But if you are really inconsistent with your exercise, that may be a trigger. So if you're typically pretty sedentary and then one day out of the blue, you go to an amusement park and walk 12 hours straight in the hot blazing sun, that's probably gonna be a trigger. And also just if you're pretty sedentary and all of a sudden you do a really high intensity workout trying to get into exercising, that could also be a trigger. So if you're starting an exercise journey, I would advise you to kind of start slow and build gradually so you develop a tolerance to it. So the final exercise trigger I'll talk about is sleep. Inconsistent sleep is really what we're looking at here. It may be that you're not sleeping enough, you're sleeping too much, you're sleeping at the wrong time. People with migraine can be very sensitive to a lot of small things like this. Category number 3 is diet, which I love talking about because I am a registered dietitian nutritionist. The first thing we'll discuss under diet is gonna be annoying to hear, but dehydration can be a migraine trigger. I know how irritating it is to constantly be told to drink more water, but there is some validity to that statement. It's obviously not gonna be a cure to just drink more water, but that is something to keep in mind as far as migraine triggers. Another one is skipped meals. So if you're pretty inconsistent with the times of day you're eating, if you're constantly missing breakfast, or if you're trying some sort of fasting diet, this can be triggering because we really like to stay stable. The migraine brain hates change. This is likely to do with some of the blood sugar fluctuations we experience when we've missed a meal. So whatever works for you, whether that's 3 meals a day or 5 smaller meals a day or consistent snacking throughout the day, as long as you're staying consistent and you're not going really long periods of time without eating, you're probably good. A third diet-related trigger I want to talk about, we will briefly touch on it because it's much more complicated than I can get into here, but food sensitivities. This is extremely individualized, which is why it's pretty complicated, but some of us may have specific food triggers or food sensitivities. Category number 4 is hormonal. So we know that migraine is more frequently occurring in people assigned female at birth, and this is probably why. With our monthly menstrual cycle, there's already a lot of changes in our hormone levels just in a few weeks. So if you notice that your migraine attacks are really clustered around the week of your ovulation or your period, that's a sign that hormones are playing a role. Also, if you're experiencing menopause or pregnancy, our hormones are doing not their usual thing, and that can be triggering as well. So to recap, the four main categories of migraine triggers are environmental, lifestyle, diet, and hormones. That took me a while to think of. I would advise, if you haven't already started doing this, to keep track of your migraine attacks. This is going to give you a lot of really helpful information, including identifying your specific triggers. Going forward, collecting data, writing down every single possible trigger for each attack will help you discover some trends. I like to use the app Migraine Buddy to keep track of my migraine attacks. I really like how it creates a lot of reports for you so you can see trends in the data and you don't have to siphon through it yourself. But if you're a pen and paper person, I have a free printable migraine tracking template you can download and print out. I will link that in the description below. So I'm going to go to work. I'm almost late, but it was so good to chat with you. Let me know what you want to see in the next video all about migraine.